of the things that I like about the Rakshasa's weapon and armor is that it's a very straightforward build. This is by all means not going to be something very broken or overpowered, but it's going to be giving you a well-rounded character that has well-rounded tools against any situation that it's going to present to you. And it's a cool, very cool looking weapon with a very, very cool looking armor. What's the downside of the thing that I don't like about this weapon? The Ash of War, it's nothing special. The weapon tells you on the description that it's difficult for you to get staggered while performing the animation, and yes, it does have some kind of hyper armor, but the stagger of the Ash of War is nearly to non-existent. There is some kind of stagger, but it's nearly not enough. So more often than not, big enemies, big armor enemies are going to bypass the Ash of War, and while you do have some kind of hyper armor, you're still going to get knocked out of it. Especially against bosses, so the Ash of War is basically useless against bosses. Now, why is the weapon so good instead? Well, for a fast attacking weapon, this is a great katana, so it is a little bit kind of on the slower side, but it's not as slow as many other weapons would be, and it has amazingly tremendous range, and just by investing into a full dexterity character will give you 850 AR, which is nuts. It has many thrusting attacks, which is arguably the best damage type in the entire game, and usually what you should be using and what I advise for you to be using. So the build is actually pretty straightforward. That's something that I like about as well about this build. You have 60 vigor, 25 minds. We're not going to be using our Ash of War that much, so feel free to tone down some points in here and place them into endurance, for example, although we already have the basic of what we want in endurance. Strength 14, that's a subsequent kind of thing about my character starting class. Ideally, you're just going to need 12 for the weapon itself. Dexterity 80, we reach the maximum hard cap right here with this character, and we basically have a well-rounded character that is going to have the maximum core peak of its power just at 150. If you want to go beyond 150, there are not many ways that you can do so. The weapon is a special weapon, so you can't allocate special Ashes of War into the weapon to make it scaling with strength and dexterity. A lot of people are going to say that is a bad thing. It's not, because it deals tremendous amounts of damage at 150, whereas where you can like just have your ultimate build and that's it. It's going to just be a well-rounded build that it's at its prime at 150, which is amazing about it. Of course, the weapon of choice is the Rakshasa's great katana right here. It's very cool looking. As for the extra little things, I have a finger seal. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one. We're going to be using this for a spell that we're going to be using with this build. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And we don't have this fate requirement, so if you do want to have a different crystal tia, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Wakizashi, it doesn't necessarily have to be a wakizashi. It's just because I have golden bow in here, and since we're already going for like the samurai kind of thing, might as well. I'm not using my shield that much with this character, but a shield is always nice, and Masma sold this shield. It has a nice guard boost once you max it out, and then it looks kind of neutral. Yes, a samurai wouldn't be using a shield, but if he were to be using a shield, this is as neutral as it gets, that it doesn't look like a western knight, so that is actually kind of nice. And then the Rakshasa's armor, each piece of this armor set is going to give you plus 2% damage while also receiving more damage. I'd say that this is, for example, a downgraded version of the spell blade, because the spell blade just gives you the damage out of because of it without having any kind of hindrances like this one does. But yeah, such is life. Talismans that I recommend for you to have as a must is going to be Millicent Prosthesis, because we actually have, I forgot to mention, dexterity is on 75. The extra little 5 points in here to reach the hard cap comes from Millicent Prosthesis. This is going to increase the damage when we are attacking several enemies while exploration. It's not going to be that amazing against bosses. What it is going to be amazing against bosses is the two-handed sword talisman. One thing that I do advise for you to use as well is the axe talisman, because more often than not, the most damage that you get out of this weapon is going to be by charge attacks. And then to negate the extra damage that we are taking, we're using the dragon Crest Shield Talisman. Although you do have a little bit more of necessary things in here, so I'm going to leave you like the things that I consider to be a must, and then things that you can use as an extra. We're not using Shadow of Alexander as a must in this build because, like I said, I don't think that the Ash of War and the weapon is that amazing. The only spell that we'll be using is going to be Flame Grant Me Strength, because this is going to raise your physical damage by 20%. It's not going to get the extra 20 from the fire portion of the spell, but extra 20% damage on a weapon that every time that you use your charge attacks already deals 1.5k damage. That translates into dealing instead 1.9k damage sometimes because of the extra damage potential that we have right there. So it's always nice to have Flame Grant Me Strength right here. There's two possible ways that we are going to do such a thing. Faith, not Crystal Tear. I don't think that there are many like Crystal Tears here that would allow you to benefit from the build, so this is perfect. Add that little Faith extra right there to have that spell, that access to that spell. It's actually kind of nice because there's not many ways that you can increase the damage of the build in itself. Like the final slot, you can be using like Greenberg's Crystal Tear or the Opaline Bubble Tear, or maybe some HP regeneration. One thing that I also advise as well is the Stone Barb Crack Tear, because since you're going to be using a lot of charge attacks, you're going to make the enemy more keen to be knocked down and for you to have a little bit more of extra riposts here and there, although the weapon doesn't have that much poise damage for this to make that huge of a difference, but it's still a nice idea. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's just a well-rounded build that have access to a whole bunch of basic damage as a basic warrior. It doesn't have like anything flashy, it's not going to abuse the Ash of War, although yes, the Ash of War abusage is the meta in Elden Ring, but I'd say that this is a weapon that rewards skill of the player while also keeping you on an S kind of tier build up because of the damage output that you have. This is a weapon that it has so much damage on itself as a base weapon that doesn't necessarily needs to rely on an Ash of War, so that this is especially useful on the DLC because you have to be taking advantage of most of your windows of opportunity. Most of the weapons in the Ashes of War out there usually are not going to have enough time for you to take advantage of those windows of opportunity on the bosses that you have on the Shadow of the Tree. This is a well-rounded weapon that is just going to be at its peak by just being just a regular amazing weapon. Anyways, if you like the content, like and super appreciate it. And also you that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. I'll be seeing you beautiful people in the next one. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, join the Discord. Have a beautiful day. Goodbye.